This video is brought to you by MoviePalette.com and enter ROOM15 for 15% off of your palette. Hey horror fans, welcome back to 1237, back with another review. As I continue my run through of films based on real life serial killers. And first off, I apologize if I sound not that great. I'm starting to feel something coming on, so I'm going to try to get through this. Apologize if it sounds bad. Now, so far, I've done a number of made-for-TV movies, direct-to-video films, and films by Uwe Lamel, bottom of the barrel. Haven't done too many major, wide-release Hollywood blockbuster-type films, and I figured it was time to do one. And when it comes to movies based on serial killers, I don't think you're going to get better than this, both in just quality of film, the portrayal of the killer by the actor or actress, the way it portrays events and the story of the killer, both in accuracy and if they do change anything, the way they do it. I don't agree 100% with some of the stuff they did, but as far as events, altering it slightly to make it work for time and plot. But just as a movie in general, like if you just look at them as movies, not based on a true story, even then, I think this is probably the best one ever made. And that is the 2003 film Monster, with Charlize Theron as Aileen Wuornos. Now, this was not a film that I saw when it first came out. I remember around that time, obviously because it came out, there was a lot of stuff on A&E, a lot of stuff on, what was it called? True TV, or what True TV used to be. Documentaries on Aileen that I ended up catching, shows like American Justice as well. So I kind of knew her story, but I didn't know the movie was actually based on her until years later. And then when I first saw it, I was absolutely blown away. I mean, Charlize Theron as Aileen has got to be either my first or second favorite performance by an actress ever. She deserved all the accolades in the world that she won. In fact, I'm pretty sure she won every award that an actor can win for her portrayal. And to me, it's better than an impression. It's not an impression. Like, an impression is when you say lines that already exist. You know, she embodies the character, much in the way that, like, when Jim Carrey embodied Andy Kaufman. You know, just completely disappears, becomes Aileen. She really did her research. I mean, she gained, I think, like 30 pounds. She studied all the interviews. So, I mean, whatever kind of accent she has, her mannerisms, the way she talks, the way she just kind of like moves her head, and the inflection of her voice is just 100% Aileen Wuornos, to the point where it's scary. And then, of course, everything else with the hair and makeup department, she completely disappeared and became Aileen for this film. And her performance really it carries it, but it's also just a really good movie on top of it. Now, this is a film that is strictly about the killer herself and her crimes. It's not about the investigation or, how they caught the killer or anything like that. In fact, probably because in real life there really wasn't a whole lot being followed up until I think it was her fourth victim when pieces started to fit together. And then they caught her after her seventh. But, yeah, it's a really great movie. It is one of the more accurate ones I've seen. It doesn't change a whole lot. You know, there are a lot of things that are verbatim. Like, at the end, during her sentencing hearing, her outburst is almost verbatim. The phone call, the tapped, recorded phone call between her and her lover, named Selby in this, played by Christina Ricci. A lot of that took dialogue from the real tape itself. But, now, one thing that people may disagree on, including people that knew Aileen in real life, is that this movie does portray Aileen kind of as a victim. It shows her in a sympathetic light, or at worst, it portrays her descent into becoming a cold blooded monster. Starts off as self defense, then it kind of becomes a means to an end, and then by the end of it, it's sort of this, just being a cold blooded killer. I know a lot of people disagree with that. I disagree with it to an extent because go on any video about Aileen, any interview, any documentary, any video on her, and then read the comments on it. You will see infinite comments, probably mostly from women, calling her, a beautiful soul, a poor angel, just a poor lost baby girl, too bad. She just wanted to be loved. Yes, she had a horrible childhood, an awful, awful childhood, yes. But she's still a serial killer. I mean, take a serial killer with the same, or if not, an arguably worse childhood. Ed Gein, Henry Lee Lucas, or just other ones with just bad childhoods in general. I mean, if you want to talk about just wanting to be loved, Jeffrey Dahmer, just wanting to have friends, Joel Rifkin. I mean, any serial killer with a bad childhood, bad upbringing, are they poor lost angels? Are they poor baby souls that just, are actually victims, or are they monsters? Now, yes, Aileen did go back and forth from saying that, she was a victim of assault in all 7 cases. And then later on she would say, no, I did it in cold blood, it was all me. And then she would say, she kept flip-flopping back and forth, but I'll get into that. Now, it was directed by Patty Jenkins, who also wrote the film. I think she was heavily inspired by Eileen's actual book, Monster, My Story, which I don't have any actual books specifically on her. I know there's several. There's her book, Monster. There's a tell-all, like, in her own words, book called Dear Dawn, which was a childhood friend of hers. On top of just numerous books, like this one called Lethal Intent. I think a lot of them have gone out of print. On top of the documentaries by Nick Broomfield, The Selling of a Serial Killer from 92 or 93, and then The Life and Death of a Serial Killer from 2003, aka the 2002 interviews. I think those have gone out of print as well. You can find them on YouTube. They're fascinating documentaries, fascinating interviews. So, written and directed by Patty Jenkins. I think I read somewhere, and there's also some good special features on here, like just a featurette of where the director was coming from. I think she wanted to show the love story between Aileen and Selby, or Tyria, full name Tyria Moore. But Charlize Theron also served as a producer. Stars Theron, Christina Ricci, Bruce Dern has a small supporting role. Lee Tergesen plays her first victim, who was renamed. Steve Bernstein did the cinematography. BT did the music. And it was widely released Christmas Eve of 2003. Yeah. Wonderful Christmas movie. And it was a sizable hit considering the budget, which was $1.5 million. It made $64.2. So it made money, but it wasn't the worldwide smash hit that it kind of deserved. And then, of course, Theron swept every awards. Oscars, Golden Globes, BAFTA, Critics' Choice, Independent Spirit, all kinds. And she deserved it. This is probably the best performance of anybody, actor or actress, of someone playing a serial killer, a real-life killer. She is just flawless, absolutely flawless performance. And also just how she disappears beneath the makeup as well. And her brown contacts really, I mean, there are scenes like when she gets really livid and her eyes do that bug out thing where they just look black. They just look, you know, like the way Dr. Loomis describes Michael, like just like the blackest eyes, like nothing behind them. And when she really has her outbursts, either because she's yelling, being vulgar, any of that, when she's like, yo, these guys want to fucking. She sounds just like her. I mean, absolutely uncanny performance. Definitely the best part that I could say about the film. Now, the things I do have on Aileen is, of course, stuff I've shown many, many times. Uh, Numerous documentaries. I do have 2 books on female serial killers, which a lot of people seem to think that she is either the first or the most notorious. I will agree with most notorious. Most big female serial killers were actually around 1800s, turn of the century, turn of the 20th century. As far as like modern, during like the heyday of serial killers, she's definitely the most notorious. But I'll talk about that. And then, of course, roughly around 24 encyclopedic type books, which I pulled these 2 because she's on the cover of both of them. This one is my favorite book. It's my Bible. So I guess real quick, just some stuff about Aileen Wuornos. She was born February 29th, 1956. And between November 30th of 89 and November 19th of 90, she murdered 7 men with a .22 caliber pistol while working as a prostitute. After being apprehended on January 9th of 91, she was sentenced to death for 6 of the murders on January and April of 92 and January of 93, and given 6 death sentences. And then on February 9th of 2002, she was executed by lethal injection in Florida State Prison at the age of 46. At the time, she claimed all her murders were in self-defense, as they had all either assaulted her or attempted to assault her. But she often went back and forth whether she acted in self-defense, whether it was just a means to an end to support herself, or because it was cold blood and she hated them. Now, yes, she did have a horrible past where she never met her father. She lived with her grandfather. She was often sexually abused by her grandfather and at least one of his friends, even to the point of being impregnated at 13, having to put the child up for adoption. And then at 15, she was kicked out and began a life of prostitution. She was known to be first engaged in sexual activities at the age of 11. And that was everything from, as the beginning of the film depicts, flashing for cigarettes, or hooking up with this guy, or hooking up with that one, to get something in return. That was the way she learned about sex, was that it was kind of a give-take reward kind of transaction. Then in 2002, she started accusing the prison of systematic torture, such as using high-frequency sound waves, sensory deprivation, poisoning her food, but also claiming that police knew about her and let her kill to, quote, clean up the streets. And then once it became too big, or they thought she had done enough, they busted her, then let her take the fall and get put to death for it. And all of these can be seen and heard in Nick Broomfield's 2002 interviews, which I already gave the name of. And yes, she's widely thought to be the most notorious, and in some cases first or only female serial killer, where there have been many before her, like Jane Toppan, Nanny Doss, Belle Gunness. Around the same time was Beverly Allett, and then way, way back was Elizabeth Bathory. But there was also female serial killers that were part of the killer couples category, such as Rosemary West, Myra Hindley, and Carla Homolka. So now we come up to this film, and I think a lot of the voiceover in this from Charlize Theron is verbatim or almost verbatim from interviews and Eileen's, in her own words, book or her memoir, it very briefly just shows her being abused at a very young age, even as early as between 5 and 8, and then her becoming more promiscuous and being involved in sexual activities, including for money, in her teens. And then we just jump up to seemingly 1989, where she ended up in Florida. Uh, it shows that, well, and then later on, through voiceover, it talks about how she was impregnated at, uh, actually, I do have that in my notes, I think at 13, but it was actually 14, and people didn't know, actually, if it was her grandfather's or her grandfather's friend, but that's in some voiceover later on. That's nothing we see in the beginning of the film. But it shows her going into a bar where she meets Selby Wall, played by Christina Ricci. They become friends and they become lovers. And in real life, her name was Tyria Moore. They called each other Ty and Lee. And this depicts them meeting 2 days before her first murder, when in reality they actually met in 1986, 3 years before her first murder. And the movie portrays it as kind of a love story in hell, where in reality, Lee considered herself to be deeply in love with Tyria. But Ty always said that, it felt more like sisters than lovers. And the movie even shows her to kind of be using Lee as just a means to have a life away from her family or the people she was staying with, where she could be herself, a lesbian. Which also, her appearance, this is not a case of a movie trying to make a more, quote, conventionally attractive version of a real-life person. Christina Ricci does look very, very different than the real-life Tyree. That was upon Tyria's request. She wanted her privacy and her likeness. Due to privacy, she didn't want her likeness to be shown. So, she's smaller, slimmer, a bit more feminine looking. So it wasn't because the movie wanted a more attractive kind of person. It was actually upon her request. Most of the movie shows her wearing a cast that has nothing to do with the real-life Tyria. Christina Ricci actually hurt herself prior to filming, but they're able to incorporate that into the film. So it shows them meeting, and then, which they met at the Zodiac bar in real life. It shows her first victim, played by Vincent Turgeson. His name was Vincent something, but in real life his name was Richard Mallory. And this movie does depict the brutal beating and sexual assault that Aileen claims Mallory committed upon her. And the reason why they did that is because there's no way to really prove or disprove it. They're just they are kind of showing the film through Eileen's eyes. So that's why I think Patty Jenkins put that scene in there. And it is brutal. It is, a very brutal scene. Tying her up, pouring alcohol all over her, cuts and abrasions. But she shot him twice in real life. In this, she empties the revolver on him, steals his car. Oh, why is this thing there? And then it shows that her and Selby moving into a hotel, which they did have a very nomadic lifestyle. For a while, they stayed at the old Fairview Inn in Florida. And then it shows that she wants to quit prostitution, go get a job. I think that was fabricated. She just kept on being a prostitute. And in the film, it depicts Selby as being angry about it and wishing that she would quit, when in real life, Tyria was willing to turn a blind eye and support her prostitution as a means to support them financially. And then as far as the murders go, Tyria just kind of said she didn't want to know because she didn't want to be an accessory. Now, the scene when Aileen admits to Selby that she killed a man, it is more dramatic. It is more, like they're both crying, they're both worried. Selby's mad that they're stuck, not going anywhere in life. Why can't they go out and do stuff? Why can't, why are things the way they are? Why do you have to keep hooking? Or why did you quit hooking? Which, that is an angle as well. Why did you quit hooking, not making money? And then she says, because I killed someone. According to Tyria's testimony, she said it with no emotion. The movie does depict, it's this big emotional scene. But while she's having her job interviews and mentions the whole thing with baby and adoption, there is a scene where a cop picks her up and makes her perform sexual acts on him because he picked her up sometime previously and she owed him. I think that was fabricated. I think that was just to show sort of cops' views of prostitutes, especially at that time. Then it shows her second victim. And none of these victims are really named except for the first one, and we just see that on a newspaper. Which is a guy that likes to be called Daddy, so she justifies it as being a child predator. She shoots him. And in real life, his name was David Spears. He was reported missing May 19th of 90. Found shot 6 times. Now, a lot of her victims were shot many times. One was even found shot 9 times, which means she would have to empty the revolver, reload it, shoot 3 more times, which is one of the big things for why it doesn't look or sound like self-defense. Let's see. Shows them moving into a house together. They never had a house. I think at best they lived in sort of a crappy apartment. Tyria sometimes worked cleaning hotel rooms. It doesn't show any of that. There is a scene with this one John played by Pruitt Taylor Vance, great character actor, who's like this sort of mentally challenged, stuttering guy. And by this time, she's using hooking and killing as a means to get paid. But here she feels bad for him, gives him a hand job and lets him live. I think that was fabricated as well. Selby mad about prostitution, and when in real life she supported it, at least quietly, but then there's the scene like, why did you quit? I'm starving. And then there was, then it shows another victim out in the woods where she talks about being assaulted by her father's friend, and then she told her father she was beaten by him around the age of 8. In real life, she never met her father. He was imprisoned at the time she was born, and then hanged himself in jail, so she never met him. It was actually her grandfather that all that happened with. Now, this is the third victim shown, which he showed being shot out in the woods and left on a blanket. In real life, Charles Carskadden, he was shot, but he was found wrapped in an electric blanket, badly decomposed, which he was killed May 30th, found June 6th of 1990. But then she finds out he was a cop. Now, I think this is a combination of characters, because that victim was not a cop, but her sixth victim, Charles Dick Humphreys, was a retired Marine and former chief of police. So I think they're starting to combine some characters and victims. Which also, Bruce Dern, his character is a composite character of people in Eileen's life. Because I think you only see 4 of the 7 victims, so they're kind of combining some of them. And in real life, he was killed September 11th of 1990, the 6th victim. It shows that the police are not onto them until after they crash this red car, which belonged to, in real life, it belonged to the 4th victim. I don't remember exactly where it was in this. This elderly woman sees them, they just drive away, dump the car, and then she's able to give enough information for a composite sketch, and then it goes way out in the media, and then that's when police start turning on them. That's actually pretty accurate. The steps of how police were onto them and the means of how they caught them, even though it doesn't show much of the investigation. But it also doesn't show a lot of the pawning that Aileen did. Like, the police officer victim, she pawned his pistol, and they went to pawn shops, found her name was on the receipt. This just makes it look like they found her via the composite sketch. It does show the last victim, which was a guy that tried to help her. In the film, this is kind of when it shows her descent, because first we see self-defense, then we see sort of like her nervous to do it, but it's like her new job. Then we see her enjoying it, and now we see her having to do it even though she doesn't want to. And she just kills this poor guy that's trying to help her, which in real life, that was on November 19th, 1990, and that was Walter Gino Antonio. He was shot 5 times. And then it shows Shelby leaving by bus. She went to go visit her family for Thanksgiving in real life, and then she stayed with them for a while. And in January, that's when Aileen was arrested at the Last Resort bar, which this does show. It shows her at the Last Resort being arrested. One of the arresting officers is an undercover cop played by Kate Hodder. And then, it shows her in jail with the taped incriminating phone call between her and Selby, most of which was derived completely from the tapes. And then it shows her outburst after she was sentenced to death. That was pretty much verbatim. And then it just ends with her walking down the hallway. And yeah, it does show her as kind of a victim, which, I get the idea of her terrible childhood. Maybe she was assaulted terribly by the first victim. But there is evidence to show that, you don't shoot someone 6 times, granted, it's a .22, and then have to reload it and shoot him 3 more times. And she was living a very poor, nomadic lifestyle. She was known to have borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. So I think she was someone that maybe she did need the money, to support herself, but it didn't bother her to kill at the very least. I don't praise Aileen Wuornos as this lost, beautiful, tragic soul that a lot of people, mostly women, do, that you'll see in any comment section. I guess I actually went over all the differences that I noticed, but just some similarities, at least within Theron's performance, is how she would just have these outbursts and disruptive, vulgar outbursts over the smallest things in public, which Theron was absolutely marvelous at. She would use pictures of children that she would say was hers to lure clients in or to think she was harmless. The police crash I mentioned, reported phone call. So it's probably an equal amount of similarities or things that are factual and things that are fabricated. But the things that are fabricated just seem kind of like a Hollywood treatment. Like when it shows them getting closer as friends and becoming more fond of each other, like it shows them roller skating or on a Ferris wheel. I guess they never shared stories about doing that together. I guess if they did portray Aileen telling Selby that she killed someone in an emotionless way, it would have taken away the sympathetic edge of the film. But, I always thought this film was absolutely marvelous. This is how you do a real-life serial killer film. I mean, sure, there are aspects of a serial killer's life that you can highlight as being like, this is either sympathetic or maybe this is what led to them being that way. But you still got to remember, they are monsters. And I think towards the end, it does show her that way. Maybe not to the fullest extent of how she really was. I mean, she kind of maintains the sympathetic angle throughout the whole film. And, throughout the love story, some people criticize Christina Ricci's performance as bad acting, when in reality, a lot of people think Tyria was using Aileen. Like, she was using her, like, okay, you go hook and support us. So she kind of had to be an actor. Roger Ebert said she's playing, she's playing someone who is a bad actress with her loved one, and she's doing it well. But the biggest compliment, apart from just telling the story straight, I mean, it doesn't really shy away from any gruesome or hard to watch or hard to hear facts. I mean, it does show them. Other than that, the biggest thing is Charlize Theron. I mean, this is the role she was born to play. This is the absolute greatest performance of, a real life killer. I've always said Kathy Bates in Misery was my favorite performance by an actress, but this is probably the biggest performance by an actress where she just completely disappears. It completely embodies someone else, and Theron is absolutely flawless in it. I love her performance so much. It's not just an impression. She's behaving like Aileen. A lot of her lines that she was given that's not Eileen's real life lines, she's saying herself, and she's behaving like Aileen, which is magnificent. It's been a while since I watched the featurette. I probably should have done that first to get her angle on it, but I wish I saw this when it first came out. It actually took me quite a while to see it, but ever since I saw it for the first time, I thought this movie was just magnificent. And I know not all serial killer films can be pulled off this way. Aileen is kind of a touchy one because people want to portray her as either sympathetic or this cold-blooded, man killer, man hater. It can go either way, but I do wish that serial killer films, especially the Hollywood ones, or hell, even the direct-to-video ones, were made this good, with this much care, with an actor or actress where even if they don't look like her, transform them. Like, because Charlize Theron, one, is a beautiful woman, doesn't look like Aileen at all. In fact, she actually looks more like her, obviously back in the early 90s, but they were able to transform her wonderfully. And, yeah, honestly, I would have to say, even if this isn't my favorite serial killer film, I definitely have to say this one is the best made. It's the best made just as far as quality of film, the performance of the killer, and just, literally putting that killer on the screen, both in looks and, acting, but also just the way it tells the story. It doesn't shy away from anything. It shows the hard to watch, hard to listen to details. It fabricates very little, like just enough to move the plot forward. And yeah, just an excellent, excellent movie. I've always loved it. Without a doubt, the best real life serial killer film. So I was able to get through it. Damn. So I got plenty more to get to for the rest of November. There are more Hollywood ones like this. I do have a few more TV ones as well. Which there was a TV movie, I think it was called Overkill, which came out in 1992, which I should see if I can find. See if that's as good as other made-for-TV movies. But like the Bundy one, there is one called Aileen Wuornos, American Boogie Woman with Peyton List. I have no interest in seeing that because I know it's just another novelty, shitty film like the Bundy one. But as for right now, I don't think you can get better than this. This is the pinnacle for real-life serial killer film. So stay tuned for more, and thank you for watching.